And all of this is really what Sema is about. I think it's so beautiful that we have, that it's a practice in our tradition to listen to music, to listen to poetry as a sacred practice. But it's not just listening. It's done in a sacred context. You know that when you've done a melodic zikr like this, in the silence afterwards, when words emerge in a poem, you hear them differently. You know, it's not the squawking on the street in Times Square. We've cultivated a space, an ear that can hear. We're ready for those words. And then in the silence after them, the silence fades, as it were, into sound again, into music. And then we're enriched by that music again and feel a message that can't be conveyed in any other way. And then that falls into silence. And then the words emerge again. And this is the rhythm of our lives and of sacred practice. And so it's a beautiful thing that we have Sama. It's the same word in Hebrew. They're both coming from the Semitic root. This both making Sama or Shema. And so just as a Jew says, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. But it also means, listen, Israel. And listen, Israeli, listen, you God wrestler. And part of the point is, when we're singing here, we're also to be the ear that's listening to it. We're not just a voice. We're a voice and an ear. And so when the poetry is recited, we make ourselves an ear. When we're calling out sound, we make ourselves an ear. We're doing it for one another, but also, how different would our experience of life be if we actually listened carefully to the words that we said? Do we do that? You know, we speak. You know, there's a train of thought and we speak. But I think it's a different experience to be actually present to the words that you're speaking. And if you were present and conscious of that, would it change the words that you chose and how you spoke? So all of this is invoking a sacred reality, a sacred presence that changes the atmosphere. You know, all of spiritual practice is not to change reality as it is. It's to learn what reality is and then change our experience of it. Not to make a different reality, but to change our experience of reality as it is. To transform that experience. So, if you want to experience a sacred reality, you have to look with sacred eyes. You have to listen with sacralized ears, with a body that's attuned to the sacred, to touching things in a way that is sacred and respectful, to receiving a touch in the same way. So here we sacralize our experience and hopefully take it out. It's the safe container where you cultivate something. And then we take it out into the unsafe world and slowly, little by little, try to transform our experience of the world and the others' experience of the world as they come into contact with us in our own atmosphere. Hopefully the atmosphere that we're cultivating, not just the accidental atmosphere of our lives as we experience one motion after another, but to cultivate an atmosphere that brings joy to someone else, that makes them feel loved or respected or held. So this is what we do in Sema. The other great aspect of it is then to engage in a little sohbet, fellowship, companionship, and to do our other favorite spiritual practice, talking about spiritual things. And so if there's anything that came out of the moment, that came out of the zikr, came out of your own experience of it, that is arisen from the story, or that's just emerging in this moment, feel free to bring it into the center of the room, and we'll talk about it.
I wondered, what's our tea in current time that we're hanging on sticks and not putting the water on? I have no idea.
Any ideas? The holy books. It's good. In the parable, this is very much that. In that segment of the parable, it's very much religion. But it's in a dry form, without the infusion of spirit. Religion without the infusion of spirit is a dead thing. And it's worshipped in this way where nobody knows what they're doing the thing for. There's no transformative effect. So it's religion. Religion without spirituality. And you see, the priests of the tea, they really have tea. They've got the real thing. They just don't know what to do with it. They can't make any use of it. So it's captured in the holy books. It's captured in the tradition. They know what Christ said. They know what was recorded in the Quran al-Karim. What the Sunnah of the Prophet was, or the 613 commandments. But they don't know how to bring them to life. They forget what the purpose was. And so they enshrine them in the book, and they elevate the book very high, put it on a sacred shelf, gild it with gold, and forget what the purpose was, to open the book, to make use of the book. My teacher used to say that all religions are the afterthought of the believer. Religions are what follow in the footsteps of a person that's had a primary experience of spirit, of the divine. The person who's had a primary experience of the divine is Christ in the desert, 40 days in the desert, and realizes his own divinity. He's the Son of God. He comes back and into the cities, and the glow is on him. You know, they'll say his face shone. You know, it says this of Moses. When he comes down from Mount Sinai, his face shone, and horns of light, as it were, beams of light shone from him. People can see it. You know, where there's transformation, they can feel an atmosphere of something that's different about a person. And so he comes out of the desert with this transformation on him. And people know he's got something. He deals with me differently. He talks to me differently. I feel loved in this person's presence. He says things and they have the mark of wisdom upon them. I want that. I want that thing. Whatever that thing is he's got, I want that. And so pretty soon somebody's taking notes. It's like, he's, you know, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one cometh unto the Father but by me. And they've got it all down. And he walked from here to there, and this is what he said when he was walking there, and when they put the cross upon him, and these are all the places that he stopped. And pretty soon they've got a map and a handbook of all the things that Jesus, this person they call the Christ, the anointed one, the Mashiach, the anointed one. They've got a map of all the way stations along the path that should, if followed properly, lead them back to the source experience that he had. And that would be religion serving its proper purpose as a map back to the source so that you can have the same primary experience or a similar primary experience that the founder had. Follow these breadcrumbs back. The problem is, after a few generations, maybe not even that, they forget it was a map to take you somewhere. And then they frame the map, and then they gilt it with gold, and they put it on a pedestal, and then they worship that, and forgot it was meant to take you somewhere. So that's religion in a dry form, and it becomes something that the priests, because they can't think of a better reason for their being, they just, to support a spiritual path and support transformation, they get stuck in a pattern of self-sustenance. Well, we'll bring more and more resources into this church, into this religious body. And everything becomes about building up the religious structure and not so much about doing the transformative work that it was the original purpose of that structure. So that's in the parable. So it's at least religion. About to drink Alia's tea, sorry.
It seems easy to point at a nebulous organization out there. When you asked the question, Joe, I thought, what are the things that awakened that rage in me? That they said, seize this person and kill this person because you told me to get rid of this in my life. So there's something that what am I holding on to that I want people to stop telling me to get rid of? Or to ruin that, destroy that in your life. Because pointing to religion is easy.
It's true. I told you the story is 1,000 years old. Where there's a very famous Sufi who said, Ana al-Haq, I am the truth. Mansur al-Halaj. He's the man in the story. The one who calls out in a public way and says, you need to be in ecstasy. You need to find yourself in ecstasy before God. And when he does it, he utters this, what's called a shat, an intoxicated, or an utterance that comes out of divine intoxication. And we can also look at the words of Jesus, I am the way, the truth, and light, as shatyat, as utterances that come out of divine intoxication, where you're experiencing divine identity with the divine and speaking from that place. And it's not the ego speaking, or perhaps it's the divine ego speaking. And so this is what happens with Al-Halaj. Ana al-Haq, he says, I am the truth, publicly. And they take him off, and they execute him in the most horrible ways. But coming to Ibrahim's point, the people who told this story were not celebrating Al-Halaj. In fact, it comes out of a tradition, a Sufi tradition of a group of masters. This was in some ways prior to all Sufis being called Sufis. The people who told this story originally were called the Khwajagan, the masters of wisdom. And in their way of thinking, what Al-Hallaj did represented immature spirituality. To be out in public saying, "Ana al-haq." Grow up, buddy. That is not going to be taken well. Why don't you be a little more mindful of your spiritual practice? Take care to say things in the right environment. And we don't have to make a bold display of our spirituality. Transformation is for the purpose of transformation. We don't need to talk about it. It needs to show. And so there's an implied critique in this story. Because it's a story of the Khwajagan, and they felt that Sufism needed to be done as something a little quieter, not this is not a criticism, but not to go out like Hare Krishnas, and chant very publicly in downtown areas and make a show. Among the Khwajagan, they said, no, back up, do it in intimate spaces, in back rooms, and private corners, and taste that tea there, and let the transformation happen, and let it show in your life. You don't need to talk about it. Demonstrate it. And so they're not celebrating him for calling it out. And that's what you see in the story. The one who tastes knows. The one who tastes not knows not. Stop talking about the celestial drink, but serve it at your banquets. Share it with people. Those who like it will ask for more. Those who don't are not fitted to be tea drinkers. Don't worry about them. Let them go their way. Close the shop of argument and discussion and open the tea house of experience. Sufism is not meant to be over-talked. It is not meant to be prescriptive. A great paraphrase of Muhammad al-Ghazali is that Sufism is not a school of dogmas and doctrines, it's a school of experience. There's nobody to tell you what Sufism is meant to be for you or what the experience of God is meant to be for you. It just says taste. Come into this room, taste. You'll discover what God is for you. I'm not going to tell you. It's a tradition meant to share an experience. It's not that there aren't a whole body of Sufi teachings, but it's never meant to be prescriptive. This is the God that you're going to discover. So just taste. But because we don't know one another's God. And this is what's talked about in the teachings of Hazrat Inayat Khan. This is why he talks about the God ideal. And he doesn't say the God ideal is God, but each of us have a God ideal that is an expression of our own divine archetype. It's, in reality, it's our own personal archetype. Who we are in our fullest dimension, all the uniquenesses of our being and all of our unique potentials show in this archetype that exists within us, and we're more or less in contact with it. We all have some sense of it. What was I? Who was this person before I acquired a name and acquired a history? And my brother did this to me, and my mother called me this, and I had these experiences in school. And you can see all this skewing and this shaping of what this being was in potential. But if we can step back and realize what the potential was before all this shaping and skewing, you'll have a different sense of what you can do with your life from this point forward. It doesn't have to be defined necessarily by all the shaping and skewing that happened before that. And getting in touch with that archetypal person before you had a name is the same as getting in touch with your own God ideal. And so nobody has the same God ideal. It's the same thing. It's the same thing that breaks down when we get angry at God at different moments in our lives. And there's a moment when we reject a certain God. That's a rejection of a certain persona inside ourselves also. See, that does not fit me anymore. That does not suit me. And then there's another God ideal to be found. But that's not God. It's a God ideal. God is not something we could ever encompass with an idea. You know, as I'm always saying it in here, that would be like the cell trying to tell you what the body is. It may be written in the DNA of the cell, but the cell doesn't necessarily know what the whole is. We can't put the arms of our comprehension around what is bigger than us. We can experience it, but we can't hold it. Let's gather it up, everything that we brought into the room, and take it with us, and do it in a sacred way. So, if you will, put your arms out and gather it up to your right hand and bring it in over your heart. With your left hand, put that over your right hand. Hold it there. And put your right thumb over your left thumb. And spread the fingers. Lift your head to the sky, and as it comes down and settles on your chest, say, "This is not my body." Take your chin to your left shoulder, and as your head lulls and crosses your chest and makes the journey to your right shoulder, say, "This is the temple of God." This is the temple of God. That's what we affirm before we walk out of here. How do you live differently when you realize this body is the temple of God? Shukran. Thank you.